on tasks resulting from poor quality. This results from not doing it right the first time. These sums are never shown on traditional accounting reports. Yes, we can easily identify reject costs, scrap costs, and customer return costs. Other major preventable cost of quality elements are not so easily identified. Our employee turnover, complaint handling, etc. Once you identify something as a significant quality cost in your company, you quantify it by using estimates. A worksheet for a cost of quality element appears in your print package. Add the individual costs up for each worksheet to arrive at the total cost of quality per year. A recent client company in the medical device industry found that they were spending something like 30% of product cost on items that were preventable. This added up to over $10 million per year. The major elements that contributed to this total became the focus for continuous improvement team efforts. Within 6 months, significant savings were achieved on problems that the medical device company had lived with for years but did not realize the magnitude of the waste. Returning now to the concept of quality teams, there are several behaviors that promote team development. These include beginning with clear team mission statements and the establishment of team procedures and goals. People who work on teams should be trained in teaming to make sure that the time they spend on a team is effective. We have to train our employees so they can move quickly through the various stages of team development. We must use systematic techniques for solving problems. We must constantly evaluate ourselves to see if we have an effective team. Personal growth occurs among team members as the team develops. On this graphic showing the various stages of team development, there's a forming phase, then the storming phase. The honeymoon is over. This is when the people begin talking frankly about certain problems. Eventually we arrive at the norming stage, when we start to make effective progress. Finally, we reach the performing stage. In your print package, you are provided with an example of a team report card. How are we doing as a team? We can assign a facilitator to the team. The facilitator's role is to ensure a healthy team process. The facilitator is not involved with team deliberations. He is more interested in the process, how the team is getting there. Team members require training in systematic problem solving, defining the problem, the diagnostic journey, the remedial journey. We provide workshops during the training program to give employees hands-on experience with problem solving and using various techniques. Practice is provided in the use of flow diagrams, brainstorming Pareto diagrams, fishbone diagrams, data collection, etc. Here's a typical cause and effect diagram in your print package. Such diagrams help to organize brainstorming efforts. We collect much data in many companies that we do not use. We also do not collect data we need. As a result, many important decisions are based upon opinions. With our current emphasis on meeting production quotas, we often don't have time to analyze the data we have. The point is that until you have data as backup, you're just another person with an opinion. Decision makers cannot commit company resources to improve conditions unless we actually have hard data to indicate that there is a significant problem and that our solutions will provide significant benefits. The fifth major TQM benchmark is to develop the people skills and the technical skills of company employees. We're talking about training in teamwork, in leadership, in communication, JIT, SBC, problem solving, etc. After TQM is solidly in place, we recognize that all the people in this company are team members trying to achieve a common goal. Employees will grow in value if we constantly upgrade their capabilities. It will pay off handsomely. In the United States in the past 10 years, emphasis on training has greatly increased. Training facilities are now in place in most companies. The role of the trainer has been established and budgeted as an annual expense. TQM requires leadership. The TQM process requires strong leadership at all levels. Let's define leadership and how it differs from management. In some companies, people realize they're going to get in trouble if they question anything. You are not going to change unless you have strong leadership. Leaders deal with what could be rather than what is. Leaders are motivators who take you from where you are to where you want to be. Leaders demonstrate the desired behaviors all the time. Leaders challenge the existing processes. They prompt others to question existing practices. Let's take a look at some of the attributes of a TQM leader. How do they develop these skills? People skills development includes the time management techniques. If we can't manage time, we can't manage anything. The topic of how to effectively manage time is also presented in the training program. Communication skills are also extremely important. How many of you have people coming to your offices to solve problems which arise from a lack of communication? The two parties are coming at things from completely different standpoints. They aren't listening to each other. Significant quality problems can result. In these training programs, we talk about communication and the communications loop. The sender sends a message to a receiver. This can only be done if the receiver gives him feedback. If his management style is intimidating, the receiver may not give him that feedback. Therefore, there are going to be quality problems when the results come in. We will have to do it right the second time. Basics for successful communications are stressed to improve company communications during this critical TQM transition to a new culture. It's extremely important that we understand how to conduct effective meetings. How many of us have attended long meetings and once over, we wonder what was accomplished? There was no agenda, people came unprepared, we went off in all directions, etc. Requirements for an effective meeting are shown in your print package. How much of your time per year would be saved for more productive work if these requirements were followed? TQM relies upon meetings to resolve issues. Meetings must be effective. A chart showing the roles and responsibilities of meeting attendees appears in your print package. We must have agendas. People must understand their meeting roles. Meeting time must be used well. One of the most effective things that I have seen is when at the end of the meeting somebody passes out a sheet of paper, goes to a flip chart and says, "Let's review this meeting process." Attendees list the things they liked about the meeting. They also list the things we could have done better. That's really feedback. It can be done anonymously. That is, people just fill out a piece of paper and turn it in. They don't have to sign their names, but it's directed to the person who's the leader of the meeting, so he knows what to improve the next time. It's the process of continuous improvement. TQM goes hand in hand with JIT. JIT is a system for reducing inventories, setup times, and production lead times. Emphasis placed upon production efficiency and quality output. A TQM company should watch their competitors, what their competitors are doing about implementing JIT. To be successful, TQM companies must be up to speed with the principles and implementation of the JIT system. An understanding of statistical process control, SPC, is another important skill for employees to have. It's hard to conceive of a company, TQM process, that does not use SPC to monitor and control processes. What is SPC? What is the objective of SPC? What are we trying to accomplish? We want defect-free processes that provide uniformity. What type of commitment to SPC is required from senior managers? Managers must understand this important process and expect and demand support from their staffs. If managers show no interest or have no understanding of SPC, they aren't going to get the cooperation or the interest of employees. We don't say that CEOs and vice presidents of finance are necessarily going to use SPC themselves, but they have to be knowledgeable about it, and they have to show an interest and motivate employees. Look at this example of an SPC chart. Notice how the process is tracked by the hour and day. Notice how we have upper and lower control limits to keep us from producing defects. We can determine when the process goes out of control and fix it before defects are produced. With the TQM process, you get impeccable customer service implemented over time, greatly increased profits, and the potential of operating at a level far above that of your competitors. With a 30 to 50% reduction in the cost of sales, a 70 to 90% reduction in lead time, and a potential 5-fold increase in quality. Think about what this means to you and your customers. With a significant reduction to lead time, you can respond to your customers quickly. With 30 to 50% reduction of plant floor space, you may not have to build additional plants to increase capacity. With significant inventory reduction, money is now available to support business growth. A significant reduction in cost of sales can increase the competitive edge of your firm in the face of increasing foreign competition to your domestic industries. This is especially significant now that duties are dropping by 40% in the 90s. If we set up our production lines with JIT techniques and use all the other tools of TQM, how long does it take to accomplish this change and reap the benefits? Let's take a look at an example. I think I picked this up in the recent literature. They show how Toyota started in 1960. Deming was over there in 1951 and began their training at that time. By the early 1960s, they were getting 1 improvement suggestion per employee per year. Only 39% of those suggestions, however, were adopted. That rate went on without much change for 10 or 12 years. And then it really took off. Not only did the number of suggestions increase to the point that they are now getting something like 40 proposals per employee per year, but they're getting almost an 80 to 90% acceptance rate for each improvement proposal. Your success level upon implementing TQM depends upon your commitment to the TQM process. You must have an effective TQM training and implementation plan in place, and management must be committed to following the course. In summary, we're saying that technology is available to increase the standard of living significantly in our respective countries. The TQM approaches are revolutionizing the ways we do business. But there are a lot of new technologies available to compress the time required to improve operations. That significant benefits can now be achieved in 2 to 4 years. That telecommunication systems are simplifying the process of technology transfer. Our program today is a good example of this. The infrastructure is available to assist you in starting a TQM process. That experienced instructors are available and proven TQM curriculums are also available. Joint college initiatives across national boundaries are a possibility. This is happening. Colleges could start working together on a train-the-trainer basis. The colleges and the countries involved could then send their experienced, trained instructors to those companies wishing to start the TQM process. It could also be a cross-border company initiative basis. There's no problem these days in moving instructors around or employing interactive satellite television. What happens at this point, though, is really up to us. We have to take the next steps to set the system in place. We have to cause this to happen. It's going to take creative techniques. It may take some local, national government initiatives. With NAFTA, some countries may want to go in this direction. My best wishes for a creative 1994.
Thank you for your presentation. Before we go on to the question and answering sessions, we'd like to hear some of your comments. The developments in information and technology have adopted a strategic role in the process of modernization and accelerated competitiveness in South America. How can an organization use and integrate these technologies in total quality management in order to deliver excellence in servicing the client?
We are going to face, in the 90s, tremendous innovation in our companies. The TQM process supports that innovation. What we're trying to do in the TQM process is prepare our company for actually non-stop innovation to actually get them ready for the change process. Let's talk about some of these CIM techniques. For example, we could talk about large databases, we could talk about electronic mail, CNC, robotics, all those kinds of things. We can no longer afford in our companies to let these approaches be handled by the whims of certain department heads. We really have to have a strategy within a company of what CIM, what computer integrated technologies are meaningful to our business. Somebody is going to have to play that role and responsibility, and then of all the possible alternatives we have for technical innovation, select those that are really imperative that the company gets involved with. So the TQM is completely compatible, but it does also require structured planning of what CIM technologies we're going to develop in our company.
Let me compliment what George was just talking about, because I think it's so important from a humanistic standpoint for the leaders of a company to make a commitment. See, the commitment must come from the top. Secondly, once that commitment is made, the leaders have to create a vision. And that vision must be carried out throughout the company so that every employee is very clear as to who the company is, where they're going, and how they're going to get there. That is, how they're going to achieve total quality. And that also brings up a third point, which is the communication factor. I think so many companies fail to clearly communicate their message to the employees. They assume that the employees are going to learn it by osmosis, and that just doesn't happen.
This new philosophy in management puts a special emphasis in the development of human resources in the company. It believes that the employee is not a robot or a machine which is manufactured just for production. This has to be taken into consideration. In your opinion, what are the characteristics, the fundamental ones of the human being, the employee, who is a person, an honorable one, and how do they have to be taken into consideration, these characteristics, and integrated in the total quality management?
Well, the first point is, I think you're right, that companies in the 90s and beyond are going to be judged not on what they produce, but rather on how they perform. The fact is that there is such competition now globally that most companies can produce just about anything in their respective industry. So the question is, how well do they produce it? How well do they perform for the customer's expectations? And I think in that vein, what has to happen is, number one, managers and leaders have to grow their people. We have tremendous human talent. How do we grow our people so that they can meet or exceed the customer's expectations? I think next, companies really need to take a look at their internal rules and policies and procedures and ask themselves, what are the policies that interfere with customer satisfaction? And then they'll eliminate those policies and procedures, because it inhibits successful customer service and it diminishes quality. And the last point is, I think companies also need to look at their human talent and say, how can I reward and recognize you for doing the things that you do right? What is it that I can do to encourage that kind of behavior that's going to help us be more productive and be more successful and be more profitable?
I would tend to agree with that.
And finally, how to diagnose the client's expectations and how to know if the product has covered all the necessity. It has a cost of time and money. And the company has to consider this in its annual budget. If you assign special resources in order to satisfy the client, in order to know what their needs are, aren't you limiting their growth?
That goes back to that traditional thinking that good quality costs money. Well, we have learned in the last 10 or 15 years that by putting good quality programs in, actually you are saving the company's assets. The most expensive way of attracting customers is to go on out and get a brand new customer. If we can retain our original customers, then we can expand our sales, improve our market position.
We now start the first question and answer demonstration session. You may send your questions to the studio via fax number 619-594-8178, or you may call the studio directly, 619-265-1021. The first question comes from Mexico City, and somebody from the electrical division in Mexico City.
Estamos escuchando la pregunta. Vamos a ver, Ciudad de México, ¿tiene alguna
pregunta? We're
electricidad? Adelante.
Waiting for your question.
Bueno, ¿me escuchan?
Can you hear me?
Por favor, formule su pregunta.
Okay, nuestra pregunta es, cuando las empresas...
My question is, when the companies give incentives, if you achieve the goal, isn't there a possibility that the employees get accustomed to this, and every time they ask for more and more? How should you handle this? Thank you.
Those kind of issues naturally come up in the training program. That really what we try to emphasize in training programs is really we aren't so much concerned with increasing wages as we are increasing productivity. We're changing the responsibilities of the employees that they are truly stakeholders in the company. They have to become more business-oriented. We have had too many situations in our own country where labor contracts have been signed and really made us very unproductive. But this is part of the whole training process, that you are a stakeholder in the company, and therefore if we're going to compete in a global market, we have to compete on the basis of productivity improvements. And I think President Salinas talked the same way. He's talking about improvements in wages down in Mexico, but they have to be geared to productivity increases, which is the only way you can operate in a global economy.
Bueno, y tenemos ahora una llamada de Tuxtla Gutiérrez, de la Comisión Federal de Electricidad. Adelante.
From the Electrical
Adelante, Tuxtla
Committee.
Gutiérrez. Le estamos
Go ahead.
escuchando su
We're
pregunta.
listening to your question. We're talking from the Technical Institute. Mr. Gomez's question. The question is, how can we motivate personnel in order to get into a total quality management?
Well, that's a loaded question. Every company needs to understand that their greatest asset and their greatest expense is human talent. And the challenge that you have in a total quality process is to create buy-in throughout the organization so that people feel a part of that process as opposed to resisting the process. The challenge that most companies have, whether you're in South America, Mexico, or the United States, is to create participation throughout the organization so that your people feel a part of the quality movement. If they don't, quality will never happen in your company.
Gracias. Tenemos otra pregunta.
Thank you. We have another question from the Lázaro Cárdenas Technical Institute. Go ahead. Good afternoon. The question, isn't there a risk with parallel objectives or parallel organizations when you talk about 2QM?
I have seen that kind of a problem develop in some companies, and I've also seen how it's been handled very successfully. Really, it all depends upon the organizational structure that you set up, like the steering committee. The steering committee, of course, consists to a large part of the senior executives of the company, and of course one of the lead persons on the steering committee is the chief executive officer. What we want to do in TQM is we want to be operating in accord with the overall business strategy. There may be some things that the quality process in people may not be aware of regarding markets, companies, facilities, and so forth. But having the Chief Executive Officer make sure that we're operating as a team working together. And that way you can prevent the TQM process from becoming an entity unto itself. It is integrated with the total company strategy.
Thank you. We have another question from a participant. It comes from Paraguay, Asunción, the university, the Catholic University. Go ahead. Hello. Hello.
Por favor, lo escuchamos. Adelante.
Go ahead.
Sí,
le saluda Jorge Riveros. Sí, la siguiente pregunta. ¿Cuáles son las experiencias
What's your experience
en implantación
while implementing
de administración por calidad total en
TQM
empresas de servicios públicos
in public service
de
companies
países en vías de desarrollo?
and companies in countries which are developing countries, where the organizations are criticized and with respect to quality and service and the costs of these. Thank you very much.
This is a problem that exists in every country at every level of government. We have this issue in the United States, and I'll speak from a perspective of the United States. Right now, Vice President Al Gore, Vice President of the United States, is leading an effort to reinvent government. And part of the Vice President's plan to reinvent government is to encourage the bureaucracy to streamline its processes so that taxpayers or the citizens can receive those services more efficiently, more quickly. The problem that you have, regardless of what country you're calling from, is that governments operate under different rules. We have unions, we have laws that government employees must follow. So it complicates the process, and maybe George could address some of that.
Yes. When one stops to think about the sizing of the problem, and then also the opportunities are presented, it's staggering. Because really when you talk about public service employees in this country, they probably represent 30 to 40% of all the employees in the country. When you consider educational people, when you consider defense people, when you consider law enforcement, and so forth. Now, there is as Tom pointed out, a real desire, because of lack of government dollars coming from taxpayers, that we have to increase our productivity in the government sector. For example, I'm working up at a Marine base. It's a depot. Now, we repair our tanks and so forth up there. But it used to be before that they were just given so many dollars to go ahead and repair a tank. Now they go ahead and they have to compete. So really the government is telling them that you have to be driven by market statistics. And of course this for government employees is kind of a new thing. But really what we're saying is that the problems we have in trying to reduce government, can really be very effective in helping us to improve productivity also.
Thank you. The next correspondent is calling from La Paz, South America. We're listening. Go ahead. This is a similar question to the one we just had. This is only with relation to the universities. We're talking about research. Is there an experience of TQM within the universities, and if so, what has been the result?
Yes, there has been some experiences. Donna Shalla, who happens to be one of our secretaries in the federal government, came as head of the University of Wisconsin. There could be other universities cited that have been working on TQM. It's a difficult area to work in, but every university is beginning to realize that really we are not going to continue to feed monies to universities unless we can get more productivity out of the university. I heard, for example, Governor Pete Wilson say less than about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we have to guarantee our students in this country can get through the university in 4 years. We cannot continue to stretch this out and hold them back from making a contribution to our society. Yes, there is a lot of interest. It's a separate field unto itself, because really what we're talking about is constituencies, deanships, and so forth in a university that have to be brought together for the university total good.
Thank you. The next question comes from Mexico City, the Federal Commission Electrical. This is the question. This is from the training department. What do you recommend in TQM with respect to a big company? If somebody in a fourth level works with quality management, but not everybody in the company works with total quality management.
Well, in our book, Customer Focused Quality, we address that specific problem. The challenge that you have in an organization, whether it's government or a corporation, is that you must have a commitment to total quality from a senior level of the organization. Part of getting that commitment must come from a clarity of vision from your chief executive officer in the company, or it has to come from a groundswell within the level 4 that you're at, so that most of the employees believe in the process and they will become the champions or the advocates of that quality process. It either has to be driven from the top down, or it has to have enough momentum from the employee ranks so that quality has a chance to survive in the company.
The next question comes from Guadalajara, the University of Guadalajara. We're listening. Thank you. How can you implement a total quality management process in a service-oriented company which is not lucrative and that functions with cautious clients?
Well, hopefully they all function with cautious clients. But I'm not sure that it's any different in the service sector than it is in the manufacturing sector. And I'd like George to address the manufacturing side in just a moment. I think the process for quality is the same, whether you're coming from a service company or from a manufacturing company. I think one of the keys to your particular question is go back to your cautious clients, your customers, and ask them, how are you doing by way of the services you provide? What is it that your company can do to better serve your customers' needs, their needs? And I think if you start at that point, you will begin to find some of the answers to the quality process, as well as you will get the customers to buy into the quality process that you're trying to design in your company. George, you might have something to
just
add.
Comment a couple of things. We are all pragmatic businessmen. We are interested in our companies getting ahead, producing a profit, and so forth. In a service company, really what you're trying to do is you want to retain all of your customers. How many of us really keep statistics of the turnover in our customers? They drop out, we never know why they drop out, and it costs ever so much more to add a new customer than to retain an old one. And that's why, regardless, the service offers a very large opportunity to make some very significant savings, and to really improve the image of your company, why your customers prefer to do business for you. So really it's an untapped thing, but it takes some measurements. We have to find out, as Tom was pointing out, we have to take surveys.
Thank you. We have a greeting from somebody in Ecuador who's they're seeing the teleconference, and they have a question for you. Go ahead, Ecuador.
Okay. Mi nombre es algo Galliani. Necesito hacer una pregunta.
My name is Mr. Cagliani. I'd like to ask you, in your experience, how do you manage the resistance from high executive to TQM?
Well, this is an issue that we'll talk about a little later in terms of reinventing or re-engineering the company. If you have strong resistance from the senior level of your company, it's going to be very difficult to succeed